a youngster, maybe 8, 9 years old, maybe, I don't remember. Sometime in the late 50s, I remember watching a movie, the first old movie that I remember of the Titanic. And it's just always been there with me. And the Titanic sank April 12, I think it was 1914. But anyhow, the world will celebrate the anniversary here next month, the 98th anniversary or something like that. But I want to relate real quickly to you here, in case I haven't done it before. I watched a program on the Titanic here some months back, maybe in the last summer, whatever. But it turned out, and I was quite surprised, that a whole series of events actually had to take place for that ship to sink. It really wasn't, shouldn't have happened. It really shouldn't have happened. Now I have heard, I haven't done the research on it, so I don't know for certain, but I have heard it said that the owners of the Titanic even boasted that God couldn't even sink that ship.
Sure.
I have heard that. Like I say, I've never confirmed it, but the ship never made its first voyage. It sank on its first voyage before it reached New York, from London to New York. But it turns out, according to this history station presentation they did on the Titanic, that several events had to happen for that to happen. Number one was the iceberg shouldn't have been as far south as it was. It was unusual. It wasn't completely out of the question, but it was an unusual event. So that's the first one. This huge iceberg was much farther south than normal, okay, for that time of the year. Now the Titanic had been built. It was a huge ship. Biggest of its day. Had a double bottom in it. That's why they claimed it was unsinkable. Had all these watertight compartments. Okay? The Titanic had been designed to actually be hit by an iceberg or to strike an iceberg. But the design had been based on all the other iceberg collision events, in that they were head-on with an iceberg. Everything up to that time, any ship that was involved with an iceberg had hit it head-on, bow first. Okay? So they designed the Titanic so that if it hit the bow, all these other watertight compartments wouldn't flood. Okay? The front of the ship would be damaged. I don't remember specifically how many water compartments could damage and still float. So that's number two. It was designed according to the standard that every iceberg had been struck. To strike it in the front, it would survive that. The third thing was that on that night, there was a little bit of fog, and I forget exactly whether the sailor that had the crow's nest duty that night to watch, okay, he was a little bit late. I don't remember now. They said that he had forgotten his binoculars and had to go back and get them. Something, he was a little late getting to his post. Something to that effect. So there was a delay in him, there was a little fog too, but there was a delay in him seeing the iceberg. Okay? But they did see it. So the command went down to turn the ship. Now as it turned out with all this, with him being late, the fog, and everything, he had spotted the iceberg in time enough to turn the ship just enough where it hit a glancing point. It didn't strike it head on. Had he not seen it in time, it would have struck the iceberg head on, and most likely the ship would have survived. But he got a glimpse of it in time enough to where they had a chance to steer it, but not enough time to completely miss it. So it struck the Titanic on the side, and it caused the side plates to buckle in, and the rivets popped, opening up the seams in place. So all along the side, for way down the ship there, they had all this water coming. Any one of those events, okay, had he been on time to see it sooner, okay, they could have begun to turn and completely missed it. Had it not been there at all, they hit it head on and would survive. Had it not abnormally been farther south than it should have been, there would have been no problem. Now, as to the loss of life, according to the story, the radio men normally used the late evening hours to make a little extra money, because the rich passengers would come down and say, I need to get this message out, and they would give them money, and they would stand there on the telegraph and type all the stuff. That particular evening, there was another ship. I don't know exactly how far, maybe 20 miles, I don't know exactly how far you could see on the ocean, but they were in visible range of the Titanic. I believe it was the California. But anyhow, the radio operator of the California apparently had been sending messages too, and he kept breaking in on the radio man at the Titanic. So the radio man at the Titanic got upset with him, and I can't remember, but I believe there was cursing things, that they said he cursed him and told him to get off the air, because he was wanting to make some money. Titanic operator. So the man on the California did just that. He shut down his radio. Now the folks on the California could also see that there were red rockets coming up in the Titanic. But they didn't know what they meant. At that time, there had been no established communication procedure, so they didn't know what that meant. So there's two other things. They didn't know what the rockets meant, and the radio men had had a little bit of a tiff, so the person on the California shut his down before the iceberg struck. So then when the Titanic began to send out these messages, he couldn't raise it. So had either one of those things been different, they recognized the rockets, or they had been able to communicate, at least the loss of life, they could have been there in an hour. And probably maybe very few people would have died. All of those things play together. And this ties in with tonight's message and that the band played on, because what I remember from that being a child, and I've heard this is true, I've heard that the survivors of the disaster testified at the hearings that the band played on until the ship sank. At least until the water tilted so much that they couldn't stay in place. But the band played on until it was over. But that's what I remember. But all these people died because of man's arrogance, essentially. Man being boastful, like we studied about Nebuchadnezzar first, and his offspring, Belshazzar, and then the people in Noah's day, arrogance. And you see it today. Arrogance. The Lord called Israel stiff-necked, haughty spirit. No respect for nothing. And the band is playing on. People just think everything's going to go on forever. So let us not do that. Let us be aware that there is God, and He is going to hold us all accountable.
Amen.